From beach towels to tea towels, and from mugs to water bottles, the TNT Shop has it all. Browse our shop now at tntradio.live. This is the Steve Malzberg Show on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
All right, folks, welcome aboard. It is 9 p.m. Wednesday on the East Coast of the United States, and you know what day and time it is wherever you are listening to the Steve Malzberg Show on TNT Radio. Well, I told you when we left the airwaves last night that even though Walker and Warnock were neck and neck, even Walker had a slight lead with 70 or so percent of the vote counted. I said, don't worry about it. It's over. You know, it's going to be relatively quickly or it's going to take some time, but Warnock will win. And sure enough, Warnock did win. And also, Aaron Judge signed with the Yankees. It was announced at 8 a.m. this morning Eastern time, or at least it was announced on Twitter by a writer. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But I want to get back to the election, and I want to welcome in one of my favorite guests wherever I go, Horace Cooper. Horace is he's a senior fellow with the National Center for Public Policy Research and co-chair of the Project 21 National Advisory Board. Horace, always a pleasure. Welcome aboard, sir.
Well, thank you so much. And I want to just let you know that I've been wondering where you were because I always enjoy coming on your program.
Well, I appreciate that. RT America kind of closed down in March, beginning of March, because of the war. We were being dropped by various platforms, DirecTV, this one, that one. So they decided
but I found you now.
You found me. So here we are. Okay, so I want to play for you just two. I could play a lot more. But two sound bites. The first one is Van Jones on CNN, and the second one is Sunny Hostin on The View. And this is them discussing, as they've been doing for quite some time, Herschel Walker. Here they are.
Tonight is about Georgia, and tonight is about Trump picking somebody who, frankly, used to be a hero. His name, Herschel Walker, used to mean inspiration. Now it means insult. He's an insult to the black community.
They made that race about identity politics.
Yeah, well.
They tried to find a black man.
Are you saying
because there was another black man running, and they found, to me, the worst, most unqualified, most undignified black man to run against Senator Raphael Warnock, who has so much dignity and who's actually a pastor at Martin Luther King's former church and has I believe he has a doctorate.
Yeah.
And so that's an insult to me as a black woman.
I mean, you weigh in on that.
Okay, well, let's talk about some insults. Number one, if anyone was paying attention to the state of Georgia, since Herschel Walker won the primary, there has been a smear campaign. Instead of how would he vote on expediting drilling and setting up new refineries in America, how would he work on getting reductions in the unbelievable levels of spending? It was a smear campaign. What did he do 10 years ago? What did he do 15 years ago? Van Jones, of all people, who used to work for Barack Obama until he was unceremoniously kicked out when someone dug into his background, is what I am hearing is the answer is that the right needs to dig into backgrounds. Mr. Warnock, Reverend Warnock, is not nearly the saintly person that we were led to believe. Gloria Allred spent time with the Black Dot and the Voice that allowed people to make claims about Herschel Walker. There are many, many politicos in Atlanta, throughout Georgia, and even in Washington who are whispering about the conversation that Reverend Warnock had to his board of deacons about why he divorced. Now, there's a little axiom in Washington politics. Never should a politician get caught in bed with a dead woman or a live boy. But none of that digging ended up going forward. I know the mainstream media wasn't interested in it, but if you're going to stop this, we refuse to debate on principle, we refuse to debate on the issues, then the right is going to need to be just as determined, just as diligent, and find a bunch of young men who will talk on the black dot and talk about their unhappy relationships and past with certain Senate candidates. If that's where we have to go, that may be, but I tell you this, if enough of the dirt starts to get on them, they will stop and we can return to the actual policies. The smear campaign cannot go unanswered.
Yeah. And you know what, Horace, it goes unanswered on the issues, too. I say this all the time. People must be sick of me saying it, but the Republicans are the worst when it comes to answering back on the issues. Like I say all the time, the abortion issue, they just gave it away to them. You keep hearing the media say they want to codify Roe. They didn't want to codify Roe. They wanted to take it all the way to birth, federally funded with no restrictions. And that's not where America is. So it gave the Republicans a real in to tell the truth about what was going on with the Democrats. And they just decided not to mention it ever. And there's a million issues like that.
No, that's true. That's the macro picture, that there were many instances where on the right, people failed to deliver the accuracy, the explanation, understanding that their views more aligned with where the mainstream of America was. But with regard to the Georgia race, that was just a smear campaign.
Yes,
Unbelievable, a hero, a successful, achieving individual torn down by a person or persons who lived in a glass house. That's my point here. Like Van Jones, who got kicked out of the Obama White House, if they don't feel the heat, they will continue doing this.
Yeah, and I'm looking right now on the Gateway Pundit, which our own broadcaster Joe Hoft is a writer for, and his brother runs it, Jim Hoft. I'm looking at from the RNC Research. They have a side-by-side video of Jeremiah Wright saying "God damn America," that sermon, and then Warnock calling it a very fine homily. I mean, did you ever? I never heard that brought up by Walker or his people either.
Well, absolutely. There are a lot of steps that were not taken that should have been taken. But I could put this out comfortably. If it weren't for the smear campaign, Walker would have won handsomely. Now, when this segment started, you said last night, you told everyone that it didn't matter whether it was a quick outcome or a long outcome, that Warnock would win. Well, I have been saying that for a while, too. But I've been saying it maybe for the same reason as you, but I've been saying it because the smear campaign in this case was quite effective. Now, we're going to need to look at a number of the other races to see what the details are. Now, here's something that you're not hearing on the mainstream. Between 4.5 to 6 million more Americans in November in the midterm elections voted for freedom, voted against shutdowns, voted on the right. More 4.5 to 6 million more Americans. In fact, if you laid out the electoral vote, it would reach 271. Now, that has not been broadly explained to the American people.
Yeah.
What we've been told was, well, you lost. It turns out that even by gaining more votes than the left, you have to be strategic about where those votes are going to occur. Now, on the other hand, because the left has been running a victory lap all about what happened in November, they've learned no lessons, and they plan to double down. The same Americans that came in November united to thwart this are going to be joined by a few more people who recognize now, wait, I got tricked They distracted me. They talked about all of these other issues. Democracy is at stake. All abortion. I'm 60 years old as a woman, and I can't even have a baby. But they tricked me into thinking abortion was the number one most important issue to me. When the shortage issues that this country has been facing for 6 months continue, when we are officially even recognized by the mainstream media as being in a recession, there are going to be another million, maybe 3 or 4, who say, wait, I got hoodwinked. The only way the left can stay in power is to lie. That's what they try to do, or smear. But what they've been doing to our pocketbooks, what they've been doing to our livelihoods, it is affecting people. Look at New York State, and you can see that you just can't get people to agree everything is great.
Right. Let me I want to pick up on the money, because what we're going to talk about is going to cost about $600 billion. But I want to ask you a question. Is there a black conservative candidate that could run that this media will not smear?
Well, there are plenty of good candidates. In fact, we doubled or not quite tripled. We did 2.5 times as many blacks elected in Congress in the November elections. But look at Senator Scott. There are a lot of people saying that Senator Scott from South Carolina might end up being an amazing candidate that people might consider. Our organization doesn't endorse anybody, but I will promise you they will smear. But it isn't just the black conservative candidates. It's the right. You're going to get smeared. What did we witness with Donald Trump's 4 years as president?
Oh, yeah,
please. A smear campaign.
Yep. All right, let me move on to this Reparations Committee recommending in the state of California that all descendants of slaves in California, and I'm not sure how they trace that back, but anyway, would get $223,200 per person for quote unquote housing discrimination. And it's going to cost, as I said, about $600 billion. How is this even possible?
So they're putting more than $500 billion more than what California spends on all manner of social programs. They're committing an unconstitutional and illegal and bad policy. It's unconstitutional because you're not allowed. The government is not allowed to offer a program where the only basis for acceptance or participation is your race. The government may not do that. Now, you can say, are you poor? Are you 30 years of age? Do you live in this zip code? There are things that you can do, but what you can't do is what Gavin Newsom is trying to do. So that's unconstitutional. The state of California already adopted a program where Ward Connolly pushed through, where we're not allowed to have, quote, affirmative action, which is just another version of quotas or preferences for one racial group over another. So it's actually illegal. But number 3, it would bankrupt the state, but its purpose is to create for Gavin Newsom this attention getter, because his record, his past shows nothing in it that would be useful or beneficial to Black America. So you have to play this, let's put the candy apple in front of the horse so that the horse will come running towards it. This is just an attempt to get Black Americans on board with the Gavin Newsom presidential campaign.
Right.
Shame that the mainstream media doesn't call this out.
No, No, well, of course not, because to call it out would be against their agenda. We're talking, by the way, to Horace Cooper, senior fellow with the National Center for Public Policy Research, co-chair of the Project 21 National Advisory Board. I got one more before I get to Twitter. And that is along the lines of what you were saying here, unconstitutional. And, it's unconstitutional that Biden is doing the student loan thing, and the courts are recognizing that, but it doesn't stop them from trying. But let me say this. I talk about so much, and I do a give me a minute segment every day. And so many of them are racism against white people. Whether it's in schools, universities, especially housing, off-campus housing, blacks only, or people of color only, or the Minneapolis teachers union, where you'll be fired if they need to do layoffs, not according to seniority, but if you're white first. I mean, and the list goes on and on and on. And I always say, what country am I living in? What's going on here? You watch it, you see it. Where are we headed, Horace? Where are we headed?
The left is going to have to apologize to the Jim Crow 1.0. They're going to have to apologize to the segregationists. Now, it turns out that those segregationists that everyone agrees were very bad people were motivated not as much as the left would have us believe by race hatred, but by political advantage. They thought if they divided us, they could get a political advantage. They tried to prevent people from showing up on election day. They tried to intimidate people so that they wouldn't in any way participate in the political process. All of this was so that a narrow, select group of people could have power. Guess what we're witnessing today? The very same phenomenon. It's just a different race, but the same phenomenon. People who are seeking political power are using their efforts to malign, to manipulate, to demean groups of people on the basis of their race solely for their own political gain. Now, I know that I keep saying this, that a working mainstream media would actually say something about these things. But our founders created the protection for the First Amendment because they wanted there to be watchdogs that held policymakers accountable. They would never have imagined that there would be lapdogs that would go around consistently echoing and supporting the most racist, the most bigoted behavior. What happened to Rosa Parks was evil and wrong, but it wasn't evil and wrong because she was a Black woman. It was evil and wrong because she was a citizen of these United States. That was Martin Luther King's vision, not that one group would ever be preferred over another group, but that all the citizens, that's whites today, blacks yesterday, but by the way, they did it to blacks, they're doing it to whites. You look around, whatever group you are, if you're not white and you're not black, they could come for you next. We absolutely must reject this.
Okay, now speaking of free of the media and what the founding fathers intended and what we are now learning about the FBI and social media and Twitter and Facebook and the takeover by Elon Musk of Twitter, both Project 21 and the National Center, you wrote letters to Elon Musk to get a meeting with him to counter the demands from the NAACP and the National Urban League, the National Action Network, Sharpton's group to meet with Twitter. Because they wanted to get their 2 cents in on how they want to see Twitter run. And I know you have strong feelings about how you want to see Twitter run. So have you gotten a response from Musk? And just talk a little bit about what you're hoping to gain from such a meeting.
Well, as you outlined, the usual suspects came in with their censorship campaign, their smear campaign, their view that anybody, any voice on the right shouldn't have any ability to express itself. And in particular, they get highly upset when there are voices on the right that are a minority voice. And what we've been pleased with is that the new ownership, the new management of Twitter has decided that Twitter ought to be a welcoming place and that people can come and express themselves. I mentioned that 4.5 to 6 million more Americans voted on the right than the left in November. I also need to mention that we set new records for the number of Blacks who voted for the right, not the left. We set new records for the number of Latinos who voted for the right, not over the left. What people are not seeing is because there's been a successful suppression effort at Twitter. People can go onto Twitter, open up an account, and they won't get followers. They could be a Black person who's speaking common sense, straightforward, pro-American mindset, and they won't get many followers because of the prior management. And this worked well because there are many Black Americans, brown Americans, and white Americans who sometimes wonder, am I alone? Am I the only one who thinks this way? What Twitter is now doing is going to let those voices be heard. They don't have to boost anything. They're just going to let those voices be heard. And America is in for an awakening. The several 100,000 Facebook and Twitter profiles of conservative Blacks who talk about the topics are now going to get a wider audience. And that means more Americans will see that, more Black Americans will see that, people will feel more welcoming. So we want to meet with them to say, stick to what you're doing, you're on track, and our voices matter. Martin Luther King said we would be judged by the content of our character, not by the color of our skin. We need a Twitter that recognizes that.
Horace, it is always such a fascinating conversation that we have, and I thank you so much for coming on. I hope you'll come back. Have a very Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you. You and your family too.
Thank you. Horace Cooper, ladies and gentlemen, Project 21.